right. A Merry Christmas morning to you. Anthony Gallo on the fan until 6 a.m. The 7 fishes were eaten. About 95,000 rice balls were also consumed. There was no other animals hurt in the making of this dinner tonight, but that'll come later today. As always, the number to call, 888-808-1019 on the greatest radio station on the planet, WFAN, in the best city in the world, New York City. Your boy, Anthony Gallo, navigating you as we all wait for Santa Claus to come, eat the cookies, drop off the gifts. And for most of New York sports, Santa has brought gifts. The Mets have gotten Juan Soto. The Yankees have gotten a plethora of bounce-back options and look better than ever. The Knicks are slowly becoming the most dangerous team offensively in the NBA and probably the second-best team in the entire NBA to the Boston Celtics. But not everyone has gotten everything. Ranger fans, Jet fans, Giant fans, straight coal. I actually don't even know if Santa stopped at Rangers fans' houses this year. But that is not where we start. We start with the positive, and that is the New York baseball teams. And when I sit here today on Christmas morning, I ask you, do you feel like you've gotten all the gifts that were on your list? And we first look at the Yankees, and I think, let's remove the Juan Soto from the equation. The Yankees have bounced back nicely. They added Max Fried. They added Devin Williams via trade. They went out and added Cody Bellinger via trade. And they've gone out and added a first baseman, Paul Goldschmidt. So I have to be honest. There's nothing I'm looking at if you're a Yankee fan right now and really thinking, Santa, I need more. Maybe you look at it differently and you say, I don't want anyone else in the AL to get better because right now the AL is a joke. This is not a knock on the Yankees. They are legit. They are stacked. They are the former, AL champions. But I would say maybe it's that. Or maybe it's small, something simple, some solid fundamental pieces to go along with the bigger pieces they've already added. A couple of defensive infielders, outfielders, guys who put the bat on the ball. But then we pivot to my Metsies. And yes, Santa brought us the big gift. Juan Soto. Juan Soto is the equivalent of when I got a Xbox, the original Xbox, or an N64. Jack Carty on the other side has no idea what I'm talking about because he's way too young to have experienced that. But the glory of opening up the N64 and getting Juan Soto, that is the equivalent for me, a 33-year-old man. But then I look at the rest of the team and I'm like, where's the games? Where's the controllers? I know that doesn't really work as an analogy because if you're old enough to remember, they all came in the box. But anyway, just stick with me on this. I sit there and I think to myself, have the Mets gotten everything they asked for? And no, they haven't. It's not a bad thing. The Mets are having a very good offseason. They're probably, in my opinion, not having as good of an offseason as the Yankees, but they are having a very good offseason. And I'm like, what else do they need? What else has Santa forgotten to bring? Maybe he's going to bring it this morning. Chomps down on some cookies and leaves it under the tree. Yes, they've gotten Sean Manaea. Yes, they've gotten Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes. But there's other pieces missing. And for me, first on my list is a big bat. Just one. Yes, they'll need other depth pieces, but that's not what we're focused on right now. Pete Alonso could be that big bat. Alex Bregman, as much as I am not as sold on going after him as a Pete Alonso for the Mets, could be Alex Bregman. Could be a more, something we haven't looked at. Teoscar Hernandez. Kim from the Padres. Santander from the Orioles. A big bat. And before I get to the other things on my list to Santa, as a Met fan, you look at it, you're like, well, if they only bring back Pete Alonso, how much have they really improved the offense? Well, last year, they were 7th in runs scored. 9 runs behind the Brewers. 7th in all of baseball. AL, NL. And yes, that doesn't really, get you excited. But when I look at it, they took 2 months to get going. Offensively, 2 months to get going. They were awful in May, awful in April. Those 2 months, the pitching was fine. It was the offense that was a disaster. So without 2 months, they were able to still finish 7th in all of baseball, American National League, all of baseball. They were one of the best offenses while having key pieces either hurt or not producing. So I look at this, and Pete Alonso was one of those pieces. But I still believe in him. Yes, I've ripped him a lot on here. But after his postseason, his very big postseason, it softened me up a little bit. And maybe without him having to chase a contract, he'll be better. Without him having to be the first, second, or third best hitter on the team, I would put Vientos ahead of him. At times, I put Nimmo ahead of him. You already added Juan Soto, MVP caliber. A guy who mashes at Citi Field, by the way. You have a second in MVP voting, NL, Francisco Lindor. You have a young stud third baseman or first baseman. We never know what happens. If they get Bregman, he's probably playing first base. Young stud third baseman in Mark Vientos, who not only killed it and put up numbers better than basically every third baseman in the league besides Jose Ramirez or Manny Machado, did that on basically missing a season. Basically missing a month and a half, and put up those gaudy numbers. And then proceeded to have one of the best postseasons in Mets franchise history. And you add Juan Soto to this mix of this offense, and you're telling me they cannot be better? The Yankees were essentially the third best offense in baseball with 2 guys. Inconsistencies from Stanton and Volpe and Glaber and Verdugo. Adding Jazz late. Think about that. This Mets lineup with a Pete Alonso, with a Bregman, and you're asking me, how do you fit in as Santander? How do you fit in? Well, reports seem to say that they are looking to move Marte. I hope it is McNeil and Marte. I actually am fine with Marte. If he stays, if they go after a Bregman or an Alonso, I'm okay with Marte. Get McNeil out of here. They also are going to have young guys coming up. I expect Acuna to play a major role in the big leagues. Maybe struggle early, but I expect him to play a huge role in the big leagues. Hopefully at second base. Over at Jeff McNeil. But you add that big bat, and then you ask yourself, well, that's not enough. I agree. I'm still looking at this starting rotation as not flawed, not flawed, not a weakness. It's certainly not a strength. It doesn't scare me, but it does not build me up with confidence. So another, does not have to be top end, but another starting pitcher. I mean, they could go after a Corbin Burns. I doubt they will, unless he really comes back on his demands. There's always a Jack Flaherty type. I don't want to joke with you guys and say Max Scherzer, but I'm not going to do that. There's Nick Pivetta. Not a lights-out pitcher, a guy who gets quality starts. Jose Quintana, getting a year older. Do you want to go that route? I trust him. He's a back-of-the-baseball card guy. Very consistent. They need another starter. I think you bring back your ace from a year ago. You're going to get your ace from 2 years ago, healthy. No arm injuries. Remember that. Senga was not dealing with arm injuries. He was dealing with leg injuries. You're going to get him back. You have a David Peterson who really felt like he finally established himself last year. And a lot of you act like he hasn't done this before or hasn't had enough of a sample size to say he's done this before. But I tell you, that's not true. Go back to 2022. When he was healthy, he was one of our better pitchers. When Scherzer and DeGrom were hurt, he had already shown you that. Hell, I went on the West Coast trip with the Mets. Went on vacation. We picked, a couple games. And somehow I got saddled up. They played the Dodgers, then they played the Padres, then they played the Angels. If you remember that Padres series, Alonso gets hit. Marte comes out of the game. Marte's never really the same after that. Alonso actually back that Friday when I went to the Angels game. But that's not the point. The point is, I watched David Peterson pitch a gem against the Dodgers. I watched David Peterson pitch a gem against the Angels, which were a little bit better of a lineup back then. Ohtani, Trout. So I believe in him. You add a Frankie Montas. You add Clay Holmes, which right now, it's tough for me to believe he could be a starting pitcher, but I trust David Stearns, and that's what they have him as. They also are paying him as a middle relief pitcher. So if he comes out there and struggles as a starter but can thrive as a seventh-inning guy, still a good signing. You also have carryovers in Blackburn and Tyler McGill, two guys who I am okay with being a fifth starter, if they have to be. I don't even know what one of them, their status is due to a back injury he suffered last year. Tyler McGill, I expect to see him in the bullpen at some point. He just in the postseason, felt like he could be a really good relief pitcher, or at least serviceable. And you can never have enough bullpen arms. And I will get to the bullpen in a second. And then they bring in a Griffin Canning who, again, deft piece. Would you rather see him pitch in a bind or some 4A player like we did 2 years ago when everyone kept getting hurt? So I think this rotation has taken shape. Sean Manaea, Kodai Senga, David Peterson. But they definitely need something else. Maybe something to sandwich between Senga, Manaea, and Peterson. A third starter. And there are options out there. There are more than enough options out there for them to take this pitching staff, which I would say is middle of the road right now, which is fine. We've seen a lot of teams win with middle of the road pitching staffs. But if they get one more guy, and I am not a big Jack Flaherty guy, but let's say it's a Jack Flaherty type, that puts that starting rotation in the top, 5 in the National League. And that's not even talking about Roki Sasaki, who they may get. Right now, it seems like the Dodgers are the odds-on favorite. Yankees and Mets have both met with him. They're both very driven to get him. It's a little bit more different than just standard free agency. And this is all to say, before I move on to my next wish from Santa, they can also acquire guys via trade. We've heard Luis Roberts' name floated around, which would help the Mets in center field. Injury-prone guy, but awesome player. 5-tool player when he's healthy. Potentially other starting pitchers around the league could be available. And again, I know a lot of you are going to come on here and say, oh, they need a top-end rotation guy. I don't believe that's so. I would like it. I don't believe that's so. A third, fourth starter that is going to go out there for 30 starts would also be super serviceable. I think everyone looks at Frankie Montas as a bum. He is a serviceable starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. And a lot of you have a tough time of breaking that thought process of the old school way. You need a stud, 30 starts, 7 innings a start, under 3.5 ERA. No, you really need a guy to go out there, give you 28 to 32 starts, keep his ERA below 4.2, and gather a lot of quality starts. That is the way starting pitching has gone. The Yankees had to piece together their rotation a lot of last year. The Dodgers' rotation was not great. The names were recognizable, but it was not a great rotation. Yamamoto was hurt. Kershaw was hurt. Shohei was hurt. All of varying degrees of injury. They really had to piece it together. Walker Buehler really didn't come on till later. And it wasn't like he was completely lights out all the time. Jack Flaherty got better after the trade. So, we've seen the Texas Rangers win with Jake Montgomery halfway through the season, Dale Dunning and Nate Eovaldi. Does that really strike you as an elite rotation? We always talk about Scherzer, DeGrom. Scherzer was not good, and DeGrom was out most of the year. The Diamondbacks had one key starter when they made the World Series. Zach Gallen was it. They did not have a lights-out rotation. So we established that. A big bat, whether that's Pete Alonso or somebody else, a key, solid starting pitcher. And then I would pivot to the bullpen. A bullpen market that is still robust. A bullpen market that hasn't really formulated yet. You have guys like Jeff Hoffman out there, Tanner Scott, Kenley Jansen, Carlos Estevez, David Robertson, Kirby Yates. Kirby Yates and Robertson, older. There are a lot more options in the bullpen. A.J. Minter. So I look at that as my next need. Now, the Mets could kind of be creative with this. The big bat, I'm unmovable on. They probably need another bat. Like I said, Alonso or somebody else. Starting pitching, I'm flexible on if they go out and maybe add a back-end guy, but add some key bullpen pieces. But that's where it is. Get me a big bat. Get me a solid starter. And get me another bullpen arm. Preferably a lefty. They go out and sign Alex Reyes. Very sneaky signing. He's been hurt for a few years. But the last time we saw him, he was an all-star. Maybe they feel that once he's healthy, they can do a lot with it. What's on your list? Met fans, Yankee fans, what's on your list? We'll get to the other teams later. Because outside of the Knicks, outside of the basketball in the city, Rutgers, St. John's, the Knicks, there's not much that Santa's brought to many of you in New York sports. 888-808-1019. What is on your list, New York baseball fans? I want to hear from you. You can always reach out to the WFAN socials. You can always reach out to me, Pico de Gallo, on X and Pico de Gallo 24 on Instagram. We got a lot to get to. Mets, Yankees. We'll talk a little Jets. We'll talk a little Rangers. What was on your plate today? I devoured all the fishes, all 7 of them. Some extra ones were in there. Some eggplant parm, a lot of desserts. What was on the TV? You know, a very light sports day normally during the year, maybe the lightest of the year outside of All-Star Week during the summer. All that, Anthony Gallo, to the start of a 3 straight day show week for me, 3 to 6 a.m. the next 3 days. I've got you till 6 a.m. after a word from our sponsors.